Good evening.
Hello, all. Welcome. Thursday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and this is
Lulu. Everyone knows who.
Well, everybody.
Everyone knows Lulu.
Say hi, Lulu.
And if you guys are not subscribed, please subscribe.
Bingo.
That's free. If you want to be helpful, you can also be a Patreon, which is uber helpful, and you get the Lulu sticker. We have interesting things today.
We do have a lot of interesting things today. What isn't there to talk about? I think that knowing, the news cycle just moves. It's so fast. You don't even know how to take a moment to breathe and, reflect on what's going on right now. And of course,
well, obviously, we are talking about women's issues.
We are.
But it's not women. I mean, I hate even calling it that because it's really human issues. It's not, civil liberties and civil rights kind of are important for all of us. And it's like, if there's not justice for everybody, there's not justice for anybody.
Well, I have a very simple philosophy when it comes to women's health issues. It's a woman's health issue. It's not a man's health issue.
And it's a personal issue. So anyway, we will be talking about that tonight. But before that, so people know, friend of the show, Lauren Ashcraft, her show is Biting Commentary. I don't know, it was like a few weeks ago, I get a message from Lauren just saying, you have to have this guy come on your show. And I'm like, all right, we're going to have him come on. And at this point, I don't even know who it is, what it's about. Don't really care, because if Lauren says I have to have somebody on the show, then I got to have them on the show. So
Lauren and Jen definitely formed a little bit of a sisterhood type
honestly,
situation.
this could have been somebody coming on giving me like cooking tips. Like, I didn't know. She's like, you got to have this guy on the show. So then I did.
That's where your mind goes.
I always go to food. Well, her show is Biting Commentary. There's food involved.
I thought you said hooking
her show is called Biting Commentary.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why I thought I heard that word.
So,
I was like,
okay, so I looked it up, and the gentleman's name is Dylan Brown, and he is in fact not a chef. Well, I mean, maybe he is, but that wasn't the point of him as a guest. So he is a disability advocate, and that's always something that I feel gets overlooked. It seems to get overlooked a lot in terms of when we're talking about civil rights, civil liberties, and whatnot.
No, there's no question that it is a very big part of the equation. And without further ado, we are very happy to bring into the studio Dylan Brown. Welcome to Generational Change.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure. So the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself, and obviously what your circumstances are and what you're fighting for.
So, like they said, my name is Dylan Brown. I recently started an organization focusing on disability rights, specifically in regards to the economy. There are a lot of organizations working on other disabilities rights, accessibility, equality in certain areas, but not many working in the economy. There are a few, but sorry. I obviously, you can see I'm in a wheelchair, and I, even just getting this job, I've faced a lot of barriers in terms of verifying income, dealing with Medicaid, because Medicaid is everything. If you don't have Medicaid, you don't have state-funded programs, and if you don't have state-funded programs, I don't have the aid supports that literally dress and feed me. So that's sort of the area I wanted to target, is that specific interaction, because there's no viable alternative. With Social Security, if you're making enough that you don't need the money, well, it's not as critical because you're making more, but there's no alternative for public health care. There's no.
Right. Something that, and I've mentioned this often because one of my favorite YouTube shows is called Squirmy and Grubs, and it's this interabled couple, and it's just their life. And sometimes it's not even that really interesting, but I've learned a lot about things that I never would have given a second thought to that are huge for someone else. And I understand what you're talking about in terms of like the financial aspect, but there are so many ways that I never even considered that people who are disabled have such a struggle. And this is post the ADA. I mean, the Americans with Disability Act was in 1990, I believe. And I feel like it's like a Band-Aid. But if you would talk about some of the stuff that is still like that you would think is a struggle that probably most people don't even give a second thought to.
Yeah, the ADA was a huge step forward. It was really the only legislation at the time that even began to address it. But I mean, just basic things like not having a door wide enough for a wheelchair to go through. Basic things that people don't think about. Your healthcare following you with jobs, sure, but with public healthcare, your job is important for public healthcare, very important, but it's more the income. If you make too much, by the requirements of Social Security, you are no longer considered disabled. Social Security defines disabled as unable to contribute substantially to the economy due to a physical, mental, or behavioral impairment. The fact that the government's definition of disability is unable to contribute is a really antiquated view that it needs to be updated. It's a discrimination built into the system, and it's just antiquated.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually, when I clerked for a federal judge, what I did were Social Security disability appeals. I covered them. That was something that they would come through. And for the most part, our job was just to make sure that the lower court didn't do anything egregious. Like we weren't really first time hearing it, but some of the people were full of crap and some of the people were legitimate. And, but it's a very different concept. Like if you are doing something that requires the use of your legs and you get hurt in a way that you can no longer use your legs, that does affect your ability to work in the way in which you were working. However, if you're not able to use your legs, that doesn't mean that you're not contributing in a million other ways in doing different things, just based on what it was that you were doing in the first place. I mean, that is kind of so whatever comes up, if anything, to change that.
Well, we've had a couple big things come up to change that. There, in the reconciliation plan that's coming through right now, there's $400 billion for in-home community-based supports, which at my stage would probably, I don't know this for 100% because you never know how the funding's going to split, but would theoretically make the difference between my ability to live on my own or not. There was a bill introduced, I believe, by Representative Bowman to revamp Social Security, increase the benefits, increase the gaps, or increase the limits on it, because I'm only allowed on Social Security to have $2,000 in my bank account at any one time. And I'm only allowed to make $1,300 a month, which I live on the East Coast. That is not enough to live on the East Coast in almost anywhere. And I live in New Jersey, which that's one of the high cost of living states. 1,300 won't get you anything.
No, it won't.
Yeah. I think that there's a huge distinction between the type of disability that impairs you from being able to work and just the disability that's just part of, who you are. And I think that there are so many ways in which people contribute in doing all different things that it is very antiquated way to think about it. And it does allow for certain people to milk the system, which they do that as well.
Well, my philosophy is I'd rather one person milk the system or I'd rather 10 people milk the system than one person slip through the cracks. It's better that way. You're always going to have people exploit the law. That's going to happen. You can't account for that.
I think we also need to distinguish between healthcare needs, physical needs, things that you need just for, existence, and actually needing to collect a disability check for not ability to work. Those are very different things. If we had the kind of healthcare that we're proponents of, all of your healthcare stuff and the things that are, for your physical ability would just be part of healthcare. That shouldn't be something that requires you to have an extra anything. It should be, these are your needs. This is how we meet your needs. But that is, to me, very different than somebody needing to collect a check because they can't support themselves financially. I think those are very, very different things. And I think it's pathetic that you sort of have an incentive to not work. It's like you get to a point where if you're making more money, you lose your benefits.
Yeah, it's been a point of frustration for me because as I work, I feel like I'm almost being told, you're disabled, you're supposed to be poor. That's how it's set up. And in complete fairness, when these laws were set up, that was the reality. Technology wasn't in a place where somebody like me could participate in normal society. It wasn't there. I'm glad I was born when I was. Otherwise, I don't know where I'd be. But those assumptions that were made in the 50s or 60s or 70s have not been updated to reflect the changes in technology and in society.
Yeah, agreed.
Dylan, what would you say has been some of the experiences that most people would not understand in terms of the difficulties of being disabled, perhaps the discrimination that you may face and things like that? We're a very selfish society, partially because that's what's been ingrained in us, partially because it's just the nature of the way the system has, kind of collapsed on itself in many ways. But as advocates for universal health care, we advocate for everybody to have the ability to live a dignified life. But I really do think that there is it's not discussed enough what it means to not be able to have the ability to function the way that we would function on a daily basis and could take that for granted. What are some of the experiences that you've gone through that you would obviously like to see change and that we could be advocates for along with you?
Well, there are a lot of, to hone in on the specific issue that I'm advocating for, there are a lot of sort of different areas of discrimination I faced, well-meaning, sometimes outright hostile other times, but I don't think anybody has ever, other than somebody who's disabled, I don't think anybody has ever had to say, I can't apply for this job because I would make too much money. I can't take this job if I can't make that much money, or I'd lose my healthcare and I'd basically have to go to an institution, which luckily are being banned in most states, or group homes, which maybe should be looked at for either reforms or maybe even being banned themselves. It's just, we say we want an inclusive community where the disabled can live independently, but we never back that rhetoric up, ever. And I don't know. We never back it up.
I think that really is a great transition into what we feel is the unifying issue of our time, which is corporate special interest money in our political system. People view people who are disabled as you suggested, not beneficial to the economy. The way we see it, healthcare, education, and corrections should not have a profit motive. And when you are able to have non-corporate representation who will fight on behalf of those who they claim to be fighting for without any strings attached, that's when you really grow a lot of that momentum in terms of being able to have policy put forward. Because we are still faced with, unfortunately, a very daunting task of trying to unwind decades and decades of the corporatocracy that now dominates our political sphere. Being in New Jersey, which is my home state, I don't know too much in the way of what the disability laws are, but there are some up-and-comers that are running for office, and I have no doubt that if they knew that this is something that needs more attention, that they would be advocating for. Where in New Jersey are you based?
I am down in, I've spent most of my life in Camden County. I'm still mostly in Camden County, but I went to school in Gloucester.
Okay, cool. So you're a South Jersey guy, and I certainly, I'm from Central Jersey. It does exist.
No, it doesn't.
See what I mean? I can't win this. I can't win this argument. I say Monmouth County Central, but that's me.
Mm.
I do think that there's more of these conversations that need to happen, and we kind of get pigeonholed into, the broad conversation about Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, things like that. But this is the type of issue that is significant, and
it occurs to me that part of the
Yeah.
problem is it's not profitable. It's not profitable for people to have to retrofit things. It's not profitable for companies to have to change the way they do things or have to accommodate people that have special needs. And it might even be costly to do so. And so, this is just one more way in which you see that corporatocracy. Because if doing things for disabled populations was profitable, we'd be seeing it left and right. So, that's what it appears to me.
Yeah, no, I think that is a significant factor, because nobody, I know a lot of very conservative people because of where I live, but none of them would say that disabled people shouldn't get the healthcare they need. That's not something any of them would think. The only reason we haven't had significant movement on it, yes, corporate money is a major factor. But I really do think the biggest reason is people don't hear it. People don't. It is hard to put yourself in my shoes, for instance. It's a completely alien experience for most people. And politicians, because of the corporate interests and how they have to raise all their money, they're already insulated from normal people, from working people. And they're even further insulated from the disabled community because we're a very quiet, kind of silent subset in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely an underlooked community.
It also makes it extremely frustrating that you have a congressional representative in North Carolina, as well as one of the 3 or 4 most powerful governors in the country, who happen to also live their lives in a wheelchair. And it doesn't seem that they give a damn at all about disability rights, because I never heard them say anything about it. And you would think that if you had that type of leverage and power, that especially because you have to live with it every day.
You mean like how all of the Black congressional people are so good on Black issues? Kind of like that?
You're talking about
or women that are pro-women's issues? No, just because something affects you doesn't mean you care about other people. I'm sorry, it doesn't. That affects all communities.
That's true. But I am curious, have you attempted to reach, I know it's, probably not the easiest thing in the world to do, but, Representative Cawthorn in North Carolina, and of course, Governor Abbott, who is center of attention these days for the wrong reasons, and we'll be talking about him.
Right.
But they are too disabled, and yet
Greg Abbott's in a wheelchair?
You didn't know that?
Since when?
Where have you been? Wow.
I lived in Texas. He was our attorney general. I've seen him multiple occasions. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And so you would think
crazy. I lived there. I didn't even know.
It's really not, though, because when you think about it, there are a lot of sociopathic people who make it into high office, and they simply do not have any empathy for anyone other than themselves. So it's not that surprising, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be pushing the envelope with individuals who are living their lives bound in a way that the disabled can connect with, even though they aren't necessarily fighting for it now, and they may be on the, let's say, the political side that isn't the side that you're necessarily on. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't take the fight to them. And that is something that I would do.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think there's appetite, maybe not a ton, and maybe I'm naive, but I do think there are arguments from the right to support the positions that I'm holding. I probably am a little naive on that, but I think there are inroads that can be made there. And we haven't made that push yet. The organization I started is brand new. It didn't even launch until last week, but we do plan on talking to a lot of politicians about this. I feel like
what is the name of the organization?
NEAD, NEAD. You can find the Twitter account, need_org on Twitter, and theneed.org. That's NEAD. And we're going to talk to a lot of these representatives, because I think a lot of the issue is they just don't understand, because how could they? They've never, it's completely alien. They've never lived it.
Is that correct? Theneed.org?
Yes. Yeah, you can go there. You can sign up for the email list. I would encourage everyone to follow us on Twitter at need_org. There will be a lot more updates in the future, but we are still just getting started.
What does that stand for? I mean, I think advancement disabilities, something. What is that? What's NEED?
Network for the Economic Advancement of the Disabled.
See, I got advancement and disabled. Okay. Well,
yes,
okay.
Well done.
And to me, I should have thought economic, but I was thinking the E was education, like educating about, I don't know.
You did a good job, counselor. Dylan, we really appreciate you coming on
Wait,
the
wait,
podcast.
but before you go, I have to ask you, what are the things that are around you that kind of look like antenna?
Oh, those are just switches on my wheelchair. One to open the door to my house, one to tilt the chair back, and one to turn it on and off, and then one that doesn't do anything.
Okay, because they do kind of look like antenna.
They do.
It was so nice to meet you, and I really appreciate it.
It's really been a pleasure, Dylan, and we will be making a clip of this to share on social media.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate you coming on this evening, and we appreciate your courage as well. It means a lot, and we're happy to help any way that we can.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. I hope we can do it again in the future once I have more news.
Absolutely, for sure.
All right, thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So guys, check out the NEED.
Yeah.
NEAD.
And there is a need, a serious need.
Yeah, it's a very vulnerable and overlooked community for sure. I mean, it is. And because there are so many vast differences within it, it's like the needs vary so greatly within that community.
I agree. Technology is key also, but also it speaks to, like my grandfather who, not too long ago, I told you I saw him walking with his walker and he couldn't really move. And I
was with you. I saw.
I know.
him.
And you always want to you should always put yourself in the other person's shoes. I mean, what if you had to deal with that? And I know it's easy to just say, well, it's not my problem. No, it's everybody's problem. Either you believe in a society as a collective or you don't. And it's not communism. That's not what that is. It's just basically being a decent human being.
Exactly.
That's it. And Dylan is a hell of a human being. And of course, like you said, if Lauren Ashcraft is referring.
Well, yeah, always should love. So what do you want to do between now? Because we have our two main guests coming on at 8:30.
Well, I think it probably is appropriate since we haven't had a bootlicker of the week in a while.
You didn't let me do it. I wanted to do it on Monday.
But it's very appropriate because unfortunately, this gentleman is not only somebody who is an advocate for saying that abortion is murder, so it's a good transition right into the conversation. He's also somebody who probably is likely to be the next governor of California.
No,
so
let's
I think
not say that.
Kind of gave it away.
Guys.
But our bootlicker of the week is Larry Elder.
Okay, so this man, while schooling Candace Owen, and let me be clear, she most definitely needs to be schooled, but in his educating her, basically was justifying, and I heard the clip, that reparations were made to slave owners for the loss of their property when after the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, yes, that did happen. I'm not disputing that happened, but he was essentially arguing that reparations should also include people who lost their property as well as slaves. Now, I'm just floored. Really. He is licking that big white boot because I just cannot. Yeah.
It gets to the point where you really have to wonder, are they just throwing smoke signals at the most, I would say it's not even a question about racism. It's just a question of, dealing with the most nationalistic people who see, the need to protect the sanctity of white culture, if you will, that, he may be black, but he's on our side.
Yeah,
he's not.
So
this
gentleman made the argument that he said, well, it could be argued, I mean, slavery was legal at the time and that was their property, so they should be compensated.
Amazing how you could jump to that conclusion.
Well, it's an argument that works in logic, but excludes all concept of rights and morality. So like, yes, in logic, that is true. If something is legal and that was yours at the time, then you should be compensated. Yes. But here's the thing, Larry, those things that were property should have never been property in the first place. So that's just ridiculous.
It's a very poor argument on his part, and that's putting it nicely. But to even make a suggestion that it's akin to slave ownership is just, I mean, at some point you just gotta.
People in California, please do not elect this person.
It's not a question of, and that's the thing about the recall election in California. It's not a question of him being elected.
No, they have to first agree to recall.
It's somewhat of a confusing process. And right now, a lot of people are very upset with Governor Newsom. And we even put it out there on social media. Hey, look, dude, you got CalCare that could be on your desk tomorrow. You want to make sure that you don't get recalled? Sign CalCare into law, become the first state to issue universal health care. And then the ball will roll and the whole country will have it before.
We're not proponents of Governor Newsom. And quite honestly, I really don't have a horse in that race.
And as far as I'm concerned, the BS that we just saw the other day with somebody wearing a gorilla hat or a gorilla face mask and throwing eggs at Larry Elder. Are you mental? Like, are you trying to get him elected? Because that's what's going to happen.
I think that I can understand people not liking Governor Newsom. I'm just pretty confident that this gentleman is not the answer.
The argument, of course, is that if he ultimately wins, he's in there for a year, and then there'll be a Democratic governor in 2022, and that's it. It'll basically just be stagnation. I mean, the real argument for him that the conservatives are coming out with is they're just tired of the lockdowns. They think that that's, again.
I would be too. And I still am very curious if there's any way to compare what our results have been in Florida versus
because
California.
There hasn't been anything in Florida. So on the one hand, you've got a state that has just been totally run amok with Governor DeSantis. And then on the other hand, you got a governor who's just kept it completely locked down, but he's kept it locked down for small business owners, working people. He kept it open for big business in the movie industry and organizations like that. So pay
to play.
Corporate politics it knows no bounds when it comes to the party line. It really doesn't. One party may be worse than the other, but that doesn't mean that makes it good. And so ultimately, we're going to see what happens because the election is on Tuesday. The recall election is Tuesday. And they are, I guess, pulling out the big guns. My argument, I'm assuming your argument would be as well, Governor Newsom, sign CalCare into law, and then you won't have to worry about anything. The whole state would rally.
It depends. I don't know where he gets his money from, and it would really depend. Like how much of his money comes from health insurance. And
they say that a vulnerable politician is a persuasive politician.
Yes,
so maybe he's very persuasive.
But then it would have to turn his back on getting money from those industries to run for re-election again. See, it's a very fine line.
It is a very fine line.
When you're a corporate whore, it's very hard to entertain all parties. It also doesn't
help that Mr. Elder said that abortion is murder. Another one who just doesn't know where to, mind his business, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Well, this is the thing about it. And this really is what finalizes the whole reproductive rights argument, or at least it should, quite honestly, is that the majority of people in this country, by far, support a woman's right to choose, by far. Like, this isn't one of those things where it's close. Like, it is a vast majority of people support, and with minor restrictions, and there's people with no restrictions, but in general, vast majority of people support it. Therefore, if we were a functioning republic, that would just be the law. We shouldn't be having this discussion. And quite honestly, whether someone thinks it's murder, whether it is, whether it isn't, whether it's a person, whether I like it, whether I don't, whether I'd have one, I don't care. The majority of people want that, and we're supposed to be a functioning democratic republic. If we were, then we would just have that. So that's the thing. Like, this is one of those things that I'm not debating with people anymore. I'm just not. The pro-choice issue, it's really irrelevant. It's irrelevant what your personal opinion is. Most people support it. End of story. It should just not be an issue.
That's true. All right, so we have the lovely Anna Eskamani in the lobby. We are just waiting on Representative Jasmine Crockett as well. And this should be a very interesting conversation because, again, we all saw what has happened in Texas. It is, ironically enough, it looks like the Department of Justice did, in fact, sue Texas today over the law. So this is going to get very interesting very quickly. But that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a march by the Florida GOP to attempt to do the same thing. As soon as it happened,
sure.
The first state that they said, who's next? Oh,
Florida.
Florida, of course.
It's one of those things where I do believe that even the people that are putting it forward, they know it's not constitutional. The reason they're doing this is they do like their goal is to get a Supreme Court decision that essentially overturns Roe versus Wade. I mean, that is the goal. So to me, when I see legislation like this, which it's unconstitutional, it is. It's not meant to be taken seriously. It's meant to provoke a Supreme Court case, and that's what they're trying to do. And so the fact that the court declined to get involved, and I think that they knew in Texas specifically that this being allowing for civil, because it's a civil complaint and not criminal complaint, that it's almost like the court wasn't going to be as interested in taking it. But yeah, this isn't constitutional, people.
Let me go. Oh. There's Jasmine. So
I'm actually happy to see Jasmine with light, because when we spoke with her, she was on a bus. She was driving on a bus in DC and it was dark out. And so it was sort of like I heard her, but I didn't really see her.
But a multitasker to the max, I must say. So without further ado, we welcome back see them both coming back to the show.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Welcome back to the show from the Lone Star State of Texas, the 100th Legislative District, Jasmine Crockett. Welcome back to Generational Change.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
So good to see you. So
and in the
dark, I was just thinking, I was like, man, they're going to be so disappointed when they see me and realize that I've got a ton of lights over here, guys. It's
okay. This is still better than it was when you were on the bus.
Oh,
and we're going to bring in our state legislative champion, Anna Eskamani. What number is she again? 47. I'm sorry. Oh, I don't know all the numbers.
I'm the wonk here, I guess.
So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of weird to think that you guys have ever met. You probably haven't. But you guys are kind of like counterparts in our state. And I do have a personal affinity for Texas. I lived there for 6 years. My older son was born there. And so I have a lot of friends there. So it still matters to me. And plus I see it as a foreboding of what's to come here. So it made it like a good idea to have this at the same time.
I think this conversation also couldn't happen at a better time. As we just mentioned before you guys came in, the Department of Justice did in fact sue the state of Texas today over the Texas abortion law. So this is obviously a huge deal. I had no doubt that legal ramifications were going to come of it. But one thing that you were talking about the other day, Jen, and I think it's a great place to start. The GOP, particularly McConnell at the top, they've been very silent about this. They have not been saying, oh, well, now we're going to take the next step. I think they may have an inkling that they may have bitten off more than they can chew. And on top of that, may have actually thrown the Democrats a huge lifeline for the midterms. Ladies, the floor is yours. Please share your thoughts.
Yeah, so I was gonna let you start with the home team.
This is your home team nightmare.
Well, this is like baseball, so the home team goes bat flex.
I just want to say that you are a hero to Jasmine, and I follow you on Twitter, and I'm so honored to be in the space with you. So please, so tell us how you're feeling. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, let's not talk about my Twitter rants for sure. Because way too many people are watching my tweets. I just love that. But anyway, it's great to be back with you guys. It's great to not have to deal with being on a dark in DC as we were traveling throughout the DC or the DMV area. Texas first ended up in the quote unquote limelight or low light, whichever way you want to call it. because of the voter suppression. But what people didn't understand was the backstory behind the voter suppression bill. People didn't understand how bad of a session it was. I keep telling people it's like the worst abusive relationship you've ever even imagined, right? Like where you're just getting knocked over the head and knocked over the head. And you're like, please, please, please don't do it no more. And they just keep knocking you and knocking you and knocking you. That's exactly what we had. And honestly, the voting bill had passed out of the House during the regular session. It did. It's just that our crazy, extra racist lieutenant governor was the one that kept deciding, you know what, we've got to make bills worse. And so he's the one that decided that he wanted to make sure Souls to the Polls was taken out. He's the one that decided that he wanted to make sure that elections could be overturned more easily. He's also the one that said that the reason that COVID is spreading so rampantly in the state of Texas is because of Black people that typically vote for Democrats. And so the Democrats are the problem. I was just like, man, you had to do some mental gymnastics for that one. But you know, like,
and if I can interject real quick, Jasmine, I only knew him as the guy who went on national television and said, you have to die for capitalism.
Yes.
I was like, oh my God, this guy's bad.
All people sacrifice yourselves during COVID-19. It's okay because it's for the economy. Yes. Yeah. These are the people that are leading the second largest state in the country. You gotta love it. It's called privilege, obviously, white male privilege, but that's neither here nor there. And so essentially what finally got us to say, you know what, enough is enough, is because we had this onslaught of terrible bills. This idea that we should give everybody guns, no matter what, no training, no licenses, no nothing, just walk around like you're in the Wild Wild West. And then obviously we had this terrible abortion ban, but I'm going to be honest. We fought it on the floor. I didn't think that much of it, honestly. I thought it was stupid. I thought, well, surely this is unconstitutional, right? And I'm a lawyer, so I think I know a little something. So I was like, they just want something to run on. They just want to say that they passed this bill that will never go into effect. That was really my attitude. And then the Supremes. And so the Supremes have literally unleashed havoc throughout this country. And so I think this is a good point to segue over to Florida and talk about why I think this bill has unleashed havoc that I thought would never actually go into effect.
Right. Yeah, Anna, share with us which of, you know, I'm sure you've seen amongst your colleagues that this kind of thing happening in Texas was sort of like a light bulb moment. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's give people the civil standing to sue other people about their personal rights. Right. So talk about how this would not be that far-fetched and that you are dealing with a similar spousal abusive relationship in your legislature that Jasmine deals with. No, it's true. Every Democrat that I know of that goes up there, it's like they go up for a beating to Tallahassee. Right. Like I don't, it's crazy, but yeah, talk about that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the sad truth is that Texas becomes a role model state, you know, for so many different policy proposals, including voter suppression. I always joke that a lot of folks that believe in these type of bills, they believe in original sin, but not original legislation. So it's cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste. And this is no different. I mean, and I will say for folks who don't know, I worked at Planned Parenthood for 6 years before I ran for office. So I will say for the last year or so, a lot of us have been on edge, not just because of Texas, but also because the U.S. Supreme Court has already decided to hear an abortion ban out of Mississippi. So that's important context for folks too, is that to Jasmine's point, like, yes, you know, this for the Republican Party, this was always about winning elections. It's about a litmus test for conservatism. But at the end of the day, abortion bans have been passing states across the country. Multiple states have them right now being adjudicated or within a temporary injunction. And they're waiting for this SCOTUS decision, and the hearings start in October, and the decision will come out in May of next year. So as we watch what happens in Texas, and I'm really hopeful this DOJ lawsuit will get us somewhere. I think it's really important for folks to continue to be engaged on this issue, because we can't just let this be a burst of energy. We need folks to be engaged all the way through session, all the way through this next SCOTUS decision as well. But bringing it back down to Florida, yeah, I mean, I think not only was it like light bulbs for my Republican colleagues, but it was like they were drooling, from the mouth. Like, I mean, they were just so like obsessed with this idea because, like Jasmine said, the Supreme Court of the United States did not get involved to put into place an injunction. And so we're already hearing from Senate President Wilton Simpson, Speaker of the House Chris Sprowls, and Governor DeSantis, all statements of support of this legislation. But then we hear some, folks who are saying, well, we don't know, we want to do the exact version, or we don't, maybe we'll have an exception for rape and incest. And I just want to be clear, like, even if there's an exception for rape and incest, it's still an abortion ban. And you're forcing people to report their experience of sexual assault when many people are not ready to do that, initially. And so you're also creating a coercive environment that is not supportive of survivors. So we are in a very, very difficult spot right now. I will say one element that makes Florida a little bit different from Texas is we have a strong right to privacy that is explicit in our state constitution that has protected us from abortion restrictions in the past. And no, of course, the state Supreme Court has yet to ever deliberate on abortion, the current makeup of the state Supreme Court. But this right to privacy piece has protected Florida in the past. It's something that we really have to keep protecting for the future.
Speaking with Jasmine Crockett of the 100th District in the state of Texas and Anna Eskamani of the 47th District in the state of Florida. One very important point that I've been trying to hammer home to a lot of people recently, because they're like, well, most people don't give a damn about abortion. It's like, it's your private business. You shouldn't make it a law. Why is that? And I said, it is because the GOP in the last 2 to 4 decades, you can pick a timeline, whatever you want. But the point is, in the last 2 to 4 decades, they have made a very unholy alliance with the evangelical right. And they have given them reins to make decisions in the state houses of 2 of the most consequential states in the country to basically say, you are a real minority, but you're going to determine our legislation. I am curious as to how that has been, because, and for anyone who questions whether that is actually true with the GOP, Mike Pence was a heartbeat away from being president of the United States, and it don't get more evangelical than that guy. So I am curious as to how you have seen, and if you do see on a regular basis in 2 states, one that's in the Deep South, one that probably 30 to 40% of the state of Texas is considered the Deep South. So I'm curious if you have seen sort of that reflection in just legislation in general, and now it's really coming to a head with how much control the evangelical right has with the GOP.
It's giving orders.
I mean, I can, yeah, I would say,
yeah, I mean, yeah, what have you guys seen?
The majority of the session was kind of spent on, this was probably we had to deal with COVID-19, right? And in the state of Texas, when we went through the initial lockdown, because Trump wasn't doing anything, and then our governor wasn't doing anything. And so it was actually my county judge, Clay Jenkins in Dallas, who was actually the first one to act in any way. And so he actually mandated that pretty much we just shut down and we were on lockdown. And then Harris County with Lena Hidalgo, she went next, and then all these different counties. And then finally the governor jumps in. Well, we get into regular session, right? And the governor is reeling from the fact that churches were shut down. And so what happened? We had to deal with legislation that talked about you can't shut down the church no matter what, right? And we know that so many of these services, they were so upset. They were like, oh, we got to have, our church and our God, and we don't need masks and, all this other kind of stuff, instead of believing that, Jesus then gave us common sense and gave us science and told us that masks are okay, right? And so literally there was a bill that went into effect this session that says that under no circumstances will we be able to shut down a church at all. So, we've had that type of legislation. And then obviously the abortion ban, and those things are like specifically tied to like religion itself. But when we look at the other things, they're just extreme right overall. The idea that, hey, we're going to give everybody guns. The idea that we back the blue unless the blue is going to get in our way when we're trying to, participate in the insurrection. And so, we had all of this pushback against all of the protests that took place because of George Floyd. And so I had a moment on the floor where I was like, what are we doing? I was like, why aren't we talking about the elephant in the room? And the issue is police brutality. It's not the fact that people are protesting. They're protesting to let you know that there's an issue. Yet instead, you're attacking the protesters. You're attacking the locals that are in control. And so there's been this whole rhetoric that has come from kind of that wing of, Black Lives Matter, they're the real terrorists, right? Like, I mean, that's how they try to couch it. And so we had all of this anti-legislation. They increased punishment for protesters, which I ended up representing well over, I think, 400 during the protest pro bono. I don't have one conviction. I got my cases dismissed, but those people were arrested. They went into custody. They were charged with misdemeanors. They have now elevated that to felonies. So there was this huge attack, like, we want to punish protesters. At the same time, we want to punish those cities that want to be part of the quote unquote defund or reimagining movement. So everything was, and then of course we had to deal with CRT and this idea of do not act like, the KKK was morally bad. We need to stop teaching that. That was really the CRT bill. We don't want to teach that they were morally wrong. So stop doing that because you're making little white kids feel bad about, their history. So we went through all of this. And as it's already been stated by Anna, essentially they have like no ideas of their own. They're like literally little machines. And they decide this is the agenda and it sweeps through the nation and they get where they can get. And then they just punch their buttons and vote for it.
Yeah. I just want to stop and explain, because the people who don't know exactly what the legislation is in Texas, is that it gives anybody the right to sue in civil court, anybody who has facilitated an abortion for somebody. And it's 6 weeks. Is it 6 weeks?
It is 6 weeks. So that people understand, they were doing legal maneuvers. And to me, it was like dealing with a pro se litigant, right? Like, you're so used to practicing law the right way. When somebody comes along and does it the wrong way, it actually confuses you so much more, right?
But people can get $10,000 for this, right? Like, the damages is $10,000. So this could mean that I could go sue an Uber driver who provided transportation for a woman going to a clinic to get an abortion. And my understanding is that this is going to backfire in a way that they're just being flooded with ridiculous calls, as well they should be. And that's how this is going to need to be shut down. They're going to need to be shown how ludicrous this is by people just calling left and right, and we're going to have to flood their switchboard. I mean,
should have left well enough alone. That's what you should have done.
So Anna, what are your thoughts on like the fact that they would take this as a civil matter, and give regular people standing to asking you what your thoughts? I'm sure your thoughts are that this is ridiculous.
It's really horrifying. I mean, but that's also the intention, right? The intention is to be as vague and as intimidating as possible. Like Jasmine was saying, it's all about creating as much confusion and chaos as possible. And it's not about good policy. At the end of the day, none of this is about good policy, whether it's, in the case of Florida, House Bill 1, the anti-protesting bill, Senate Bill 90, the voter suppression bill, attacking trans kids. Like, none of these are CRT. The entire legislative session has been like creating these fake problems, right? And then solving the fake problem so then they can celebrate a victory. And meanwhile, real problems, like y'all talked about before, like healthcare access and good paying jobs and mass incarceration, like real problems are untouched and ignored. I mean, like right now, Florida has a disability wait list of over 20,000 people. We never had small business relief during this pandemic. We never put money aside that was pandemic related. That was a state resource. Everything was federally funded. And the governor has yet to even apply for the PEBT dollars, which would give working families an extra $375 to pay for kids' food. So like there are real legitimate problems. I mean, don't even get me started on evictions right now. Like we are in the weeds with the eviction diversion, with unemployment, like real life crises happening. And yet instead of focusing on those issues, it's all a distraction. It's all about going towards issues where voters can be distracted and they can try to amp up their base for the next election cycle. And here's what's also really problematic is that, and I'm sure Jasmine has an opinion on this too, but both Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis are competing with each other because they're both vying for a presidential
They're campaigning.
primary, right? So this is like a race to the bottom, and all of us lose. Like it's horrifying to be a part of this race right now. Like we don't have a choice. It's like I never consented to be part of your campaign, but I am literally a part of your campaign right now. And so that's one of the fears that we have in Florida, to be honest, is that Governor DeSantis, and I know I mentioned earlier too, how a lot of Republican leaders have been silent on this. I think it's a really valid point because remember, the majority of Americans support access to a safe and legal abortion. Like you said this earlier, Jen, like there's no debating that, right?
No,
the privacy piece is very important to people. And Floridians have actually voted to protect the right to privacy. In 2012, the Florida legislature put on the ballot an effort to weaken that right to privacy I talked about earlier in our state constitution. Voters rejected it overwhelmingly. They were like, bye, don't take away my privacy. And so Floridians support privacy. Floridians have never supported bans like this to this extreme. And even Governor DeSantis, he has signed all these terrible bills we just mentioned. He has not asked for an abortion restriction to really come to him. Like he signed on to the amicus brief that for the SCOTUS case. He signed the parental consent legislation law last 2 sessions ago. And this session, we fought back and there was no abortion restriction that passed. So I share that for our Floridians who are tuning in is that organizing works, sharing personal stories works, like breaking the stigma that surrounds abortion works, and also pointing out to our colleagues that this issue is not popular. Like if you're going to vote to ban abortion, good luck in 2022. And that message goes to my fellow Democrats as well, because I'm not sure what the environment is like in Texas with Dems that like are not strong on this issue. But in Florida, to give us some perspective, I think 5 Democrats voted against abortion access in 2019, and 3 of them were gone the next session after 2020.
Well, you know what? We could be hopeful that happens to Henry Cuellar over there, because I got to tell you, I wasn't a fan of his when I lived there. So, you know, it's, and he is what I don't understand the anomaly is anti-choice Democrat. It's very bizarre to me.
It's, again, it's been the transition of the Democratic Party moving to the right and the Republican Party moving to the crazy house. So it's
well,
basically,
if I can add something in Florida, it's very interesting because so right now there are 2 Democrats that have continuously voted with Republicans on different issues. I don't know if it's driven by ideology or if it's driven by convenience, because these are 2 Democrats that actually come from Democratic districts. Like these are not swing seats in Florida. Like these are Democratic seats, and the primaries I mentioned earlier there were 3 really serious primaries, and we won 2 of them with stronger Democrats taking out. It was Al Jaquette and Kim Daniels for those that need the context. So we got Omari Hardy and Angie Nixon in there, right? So those were Democratic seats, and they were all communities of color. This was like a very unique and sensitive topic because we're talking about issues like reproductive health, like education, and LGBTQ equality within communities that are very diverse on these issues. And so kudos to Omari Hardy and Angie Nixon, because they really championed being supportive, out loud, bold on these topics, and they won the support of their districts. And so in the case of Florida, these are not swing seats. Like I want to be clear. These are Democrats that are choosing to be anti-Democrat. They have there's no if you're going to make an excuse and like, oh, I don't want to make my voters upset. No, like that's not the case. You are literally doing it because it gets you leadership positions. It gets you money in the budget. So these are Democrats that like they accept money from corporations and Republicans. Absolutely. But they don't even have like a moral foundation that makes sense. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, look, our state party is very corporate. We've talked about it before. Our Florida Democratic Party's big sponsors are Walmart and Big Sugar.
And the head of the state party is somebody
a Republican.
Who is a Republican.
Well, and FPL, don't forget, Florida Capital Light and Nexera. And not to get too far off topic, but the Orlando Sentinel's been doing some amazing reporting. Jasmine, I don't know if you've heard about in Florida, we had fake candidates run for office in 2020.
JJR should still be in the state Senate right
100%.
now. That was an absolute crime. And, you know, I think what it really speaks to, I think this is a great transition. It's what I would call the Manchin effect, because the difference between the GOP and the Democratic Party is that when it comes to the GOP, even though there is sort of this, there is a changing of the guard in the GOP right now, everyone still gets in line for McConnell and whatever his agenda is. Nobody in the Democratic Party gets in line for Chuck Schumer. It is basically right now whatever Joe Manchin wants or whatever Kyrsten Sinema wants. And so I think that speaks to the bigger issue of there's not a very strong bench when it comes to the Democratic Party. The GOP has that on lock. When it comes to the school boards, when it comes to the state house, city commissions, all that stuff, they really have an amazingly strong bench. Jasmine, if you don't know, we were angling for this lovely lady to run for governor, but it's probably not the time.
No, it isn't. It isn't the time.
So,
it isn't. It's smart. It isn't, and it's smart. And we've talked about this.
And the reason I bring it up is because you're definitely two individuals who are definitely doing amazing work. And I have no doubt that there has been temptation that has been thrown at you. Anna, come on, run against Darren Soto, run against Stephanie Murphy, blah, 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 blah. And the reality is there are too many people that, and again, I respect anybody who wants to run for office as they should. It is a monumental task to do at any level. But there's also a lot of people who run for offices that they know they have no chance of winning. And the opportunity to get more people into the state legislatures is so vital. It is so vital because you see the things that end up happening. And at the end of the day, there really isn't anything that as an individual you can get done on Capitol Hill. But at the state level, you can have a tremendous impact in terms of the opportunity to build those coalitions that you need to get more involved at the local level. And if you guys can talk about that, I think that is immensely important in terms of what we can do to build that bench going forward.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And Anna, you really hit the nail on the head. I just actually signed or I sent off a quote in support of a Better Democrats PAC that is launching here in the state of Texas, because the quorum break made it evident that not all Democrats are created equal, right? Like people don't necessarily pay attention to our voting record. The average person doesn't go and look and see, oh, how did this person vote or how did that person vote? But when we were on the national stage, it became obvious that not everyone had the wherewithal to do what was necessary to stay in this fight. And so some people were like, well, why do we need them? Why do we need them if they're about to go and help the Republicans? Have they been helping the Republicans? Like, people had all these questions, like all these grassroots organizations. And they were like, hey, will you support this PAC? I was like, absolutely. I was like, because even when you're screening people, even if we're talking about an open seat, we need to make sure that like our foundational deals, that they are like all in, because, we deal with situations where the way that I describe it as when we sign up to be public servants, we don't know whether or not we're going to see combat or not. It's like when you sign up for the draft, you don't know if you're actually going to go to war or not. But we need to make sure that when it's time to go to war, you are there and you are willing to fight to the end, not run back. Okay. Like, we need you to do everything. So I say that to say that that's one of our issues, is that we've not been recruiting Democrats. We've not been training Democrats. We kind of say, oh, somebody signed up, we'll support them. And it's pretty much that. And like when there's primaries, everybody's like, well, let's stay out of the primaries. Let's try to make it as nice as possible. Let's just not, tarnish anything. Democrats shouldn't bash Democrats. But honestly, we don't bash anybody, right? Like, we've been getting our heads bashed in by the Republicans. And then we just say, hey, stop stop bashing my head in, right? Like, we don't say, oh, I'm gonna bash you back, which is what we need to do, which is what we did when we walked out. And so that's what we've got, like in Cinema and Manchin. They don't feel the heat because Democrats don't bring the heat, right? Like, they don't say, we are going to take you out. We put you in, as my mama would say, I brought you in, I take you out. We put you in, I'll take you out. And that honestly needs to be the attitude, especially on things that are foundational. We are not talking about what I would consider to be like far left issues. We are talking about fundamental constitutional issues, right? Like, we are talking about the right to vote, that so many of them say, oh, it's not a right. That's more so a privilege. That's why, you know, if you want to go buy liquor and you need an ID, then why is it different? Well, guess what? Not everybody's entitled to buy liquor, right? Like, it's just maddening. But we've got to reform how we have worked through our party in general. Number one, we need to make sure that we're training up people. Number two, we need to make sure that it's not just the glamour that everybody is seeking, right? Because yeah, everybody wants to be a federal whomever, right? No one wants to be on the school board. A few people want to be on city council. Like, we really have to provide like a foundation and a pipeline. And so often, at least in my area, our elected officials, they get into office and they don't leave. Yes.
Ours play like musical chairs. They go from the legislator to the city council to they rotate around.
Anna knows this. We have a very big problem, particularly in Broward, because it's not just Wasserman Schultz. It's everybody. It's basically a rotating of the last generation. It's about 30 years.
But Jasmine said something that I wanted to talk about. And Anna, I believe we talked about this last time you were on, is that it always appears to me that Republicans are always going and doing what they want, and Democrats spend their entire existence playing defense. Democrats are constantly defending their legislation, and we've been doing this all along. And and I do believe that we have dropped the ball in regards to judicial appointments in a lot of cases around the country, and that goes for the Democrats big time. I don't think Obama fought hard enough regarding judicial appointments. Like, I think a lot of those issues, and now we're seeing the repercussions of this. Like, we're going to be feeling this for a long time. But Democrats only live to play defense, you know. And I think that we need to switch that. We need to be on the offense, and you know, we have the general public's behind us. Like, that's the majority of people are behind the issues that we're talking about. We just don't have state houses because we dropped the ball for a long time. Right. That's the truth.
Well, and I want to echo a point that Jasmine made that I'm just like over here snapping and like super endorsing, because you brought up the point that we're not talking about progressives versus moderates when it comes to the state legislature. It's not the same type of debate, to be honest. We're talking about very basic constitutional rights and basic democratic values. Again, like, these are not issues that are very debatable in our spaces. Like, you know, we can have the debate about corporate influence. That's I think where you see more like progressive versus moderates, right? Because you have the Dems that are like very out loud and saying corporate influence, like what I do. I don't take money from these corporations. Like, I challenge the theme parks, I challenge sugar, I challenge utility companies. Not everyone is comfortable doing that. And you see it break down on the vote board. Like, on the big sugar bill this past year, only 7 of us voted no on it, right? So you have those fights, and those fights are very real. But what we're talking about is it's not the same spectrum. Like, it's literally people that are just, they're not moderates, they're Republicans. Like, and it's like, you know what? Then go register Republican. Like, stop pretending, right? And I would rather you be honest. But the reality is that in my case, in Florida, they represent Democratic seats. You know, they're not going to win if they put an R next to their name. So anyway, I want to just echo that point. But then to harp your question, Jen, I mean, I totally agree with y'all on the notion of building a bench, on the notion of helping folks realize the importance of local seats and local opportunities. I will say there is an access issue here because, first of all, a lot of folks just are not plugged in. You know, a lot of folks don't know about a state legislature. They don't know about a city or council or a county commission. But it's also the financial barriers, to be honest, right? Because I'm not sure what it's like in Texas, but y'all have
$600 a month, sister. $600 a month.
It's unbelievable. So you have to have another source of income to do public service. And in the case of us, part-time legislature, our annual salary is $28,000, and we're in session every year for 60 days, not counting committee weeks. So either you come from wealth, you're retired, so you have a pension, or you're working another job like I am to try to actually serve. So we automatically lock people out of service, and that's a problem. So what are the solutions? I mean, obviously there's policy solutions here. We can pay city council members, what the cost of the job is, right? But any type of politician who puts up for a vote a salary increase is probably not going to survive, right? Because that's not a politically smart topic unless you explain it to people. They don't understand. But at the same time, as Democrats, as those in like the ecosphere, are we creating job opportunities for lawmakers to have a career in service while also having a role at an advocacy organization, a nonprofit organization? Because that's what Republicans do. All these law firms hire Republicans. They don't have any cases. They're not doing anything at that law firm. But the law firm pays them to basically be influencers for them and their clients, right? And so what can we do to create spaces where folks in the movement space can also have a job in the movement space, but also be a public servant? Of course, there has to be a very clear line of separation, right? However that could look. But at the end of the day, we're not thinking about sustainability either. And I think one reason why folks leave the legislature is honestly they can't survive. They're like, I have bills to pay. I feel like I'm not getting anything done, but running for Congress, I would have a better salary. I would have more access to resources. So sometimes it is, yes, it can be an ego-driven decision, but sometimes it's also a decision based on logistics, right? And the decision that many people, especially people of color and women, make is financial. I can't run for office because I can't afford it. I can't even afford to be a candidate. And that is a disservice to democracy. And it's an area where Democrats really struggle because we don't support our people enough. So I think that's another part of the conversation. The last thing I'll say is, yeah, we got to be fighting. Like Jasmine said, we cannot be squishy. We have to be really on the offense, proactive in our ideas, and stick together. I mean, Jasmine, I was so pissed when the quorum standoff was broken, that I have to tell you, it reminded me of a fight we had in the Florida legislature over the deplatforming bill. So Florida passed a bill basically because Trump wanted it, right? To punish social media companies. And don't get me wrong, I have so much criticism of big tech and, want to break up the monopolies and so forth. But this bill
we have one of those bills as well. Just
oh my God, a complete joke, right? So this bill had two parts. It had the policy bill and the public records exemption. The public records exemption actually requires 2/3 to support it. So the policy bill is just 50 plus 1, but the PRE bill requires 2/3. So we debate it for hours. The policy bill passes. And then usually the public records exemption is a no-brainer. People don't debate it. It's dry, it's just attached to the bill. So it goes up for a vote. There is no debate, and it fails. It fails. And it was such this heroic moment for all of us because we're like, did we just kill a bill? Did we just kill a bill in the Florida House? And so because they're the majority party, after they freaked out because they were like, what just happened? Because everything's a script for them, right? Everything's expected. They bring the bill back up for reconsideration, and they got a Democrat to vote with them. So I share that story because we know what that's like when and especially when it counts the most, your colleagues do not have your back. And though our caucus has gotten smaller, we actually have gotten stronger in Florida because many of those folks lost their elections, and for a good reason. So that's one, point I'll end on is that we need to be more united. We need to be more strategic. We need to focus on our values. And and at the very least, our caucus, though smaller, has gotten stronger.
We definitely need more Anna Eskamani's, Carlos Guillermo Smiths, and Chevron Joneses in
Florida,
Tallahassee.
for sure.
We certainly do not have enough of them, and
No.
that is certainly something that we are working on. And Jasmine, I can only imagine that you probably do have a handful of I don't want to call it a squad. I think it's a tacky way of looking at it, but you have your crew, you have your group, the people you can rely on that are non-corporate. They are going to fight for the issues that really matter. And building that bench, I think, is key. And I also think a lot of people look at the Texas Democrats and the fact that you did have a spine and that you did fight back. And the truth is, the GOP respects you if you fight them back. They kind of laugh at the Democrats from the standpoint that they're just, we're just going to run all over them. They're not going to fight back. But when they fight back, they're like, oh, all right.
I find it interesting that some people in Texas they don't have the best long-term memory, because Ann Richards was a Democrat and she was badass. And the Democrats in Texas have taken stands before. It's not unheard of. I mean, yeah, it's a red state, but the Dems everything in Texas is just a little bit more badass than it is everywhere else. I don't know why. Everything's bigger, little bit slower, but definitely more badass.
Jasmine, I have to see something really monumental, because as much as our governor is a jerk and does everything about thinking 4 or 5 moves ahead, he has a hell of a team around him. He generally does not make decisions that is going to kneecap him politically. We'll see if he actually does anything stupid enough like he just did. We agree that he bit off more than he can chew with the whole mask mandate stuff. This is a county strong state. Is it county strong in Texas?
It is. Texas is a pretty county strong state.
So if the county commission,
like Jasmine said, the leaders of their state came from counties. That's how it works there. Yeah. It's so
we have, thankfully, strong county legislators who basically say, you're not going to determine what we do with our schools. If we want our kids wearing masks, and that's that. And that is a battle that, he lost on. We'll see if he keeps at it, but he tends to walk a very fine line with not going far enough where he could actually damage himself. And the reason I'm saying that is, do you feel that Governor Abbott has gone far enough? Because what people probably don't remember is that even though Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke had a very close senatorial race, Governor Abbott ended up winning his seat for re-election by 13 points. So my question is, are we at a point right now where you think that there might be a possibility of a solid challenger taking on Greg Abbott next year? Is that something that you could see? And do you feel that the Texas Democratic bench is at a point now?
And how can we help with
that?
how
can we help?
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, we spent a lot of time this cycle trying to take away local control, because the governor was upset about how the locals were controlling in the Democratic areas, right? So they love small government. They love local control, so long as it's the Republicans that are doing the so we had a bunch of fights on that. But you bring up a good point about Governor Abbott. His approval rating has dropped to the lowest that it's ever been, ever. Now, he has been elected statewide in multiple capacities. He was our attorney general. He was on our Supreme Court. He is our governor, and he now has the lowest ratings. And I think that he really hit the depths, not because of voter suppression, because I think that it's really a complex idea for people to really understand. I am appreciative to the media for staying on it for so long, because it takes a while to educate the general public and really get them to understand why it's so important. But when it came to the mask, that's when he started going down. And he was fighting against, the local governments, and the local governments were winning. And the Supreme Court, which has a number of people that were appointed by him, they kind of a little nervous about this one, right? And so they've kind of been like, we won't necessarily get rid of the temporary restraining orders that have been handed down by mostly Democratic, I think all Democratic judges. But also, he's fighting. When he just did the bill signing, normally our bill signings are done in Austin. He decided to do the bill signing for the voter suppression bill in Tyler, Texas. What's interesting about Tyler, Texas, besides the fact that it's super duper red, is that he may be worried about Tyler, because Tyler decided, okay, we will not defy the governor. We will work around him. Tyler, that area voted for Trump at a rate of 70%. Yet they decided, we're just going to do masks as part of our uniforms. So we're not defying the governor, but we are ignoring you, right? And so he's like seeing this backlash and he's seeing his ratings fall. And so, he's actually stopped publicly talking about the mask mandates because he was really all in. And he was saying, no, it's about personal choice and all this other kind of crazy nonsense. And so he's not talked about it very much. He's stopped talking about it, actually.
He must have gotten a bad focus group result on that. And his advisors came in and said, yeah, you might want to tone it back a little coming into the election cycle. So
absolutely. And then he had a dog bill that he vetoed. And I was like, I don't know why you mess with dogs. I mean, dogs have more rights than
what?
Do. Yes, he vetoed a dog bill. Yeah, I promise you, he vetoed this dog bill, right? So then it was trending on Twitter, like Abbott hates dogs, right? And I was like, Abbott hates everybody. But like it's literally trending. And so that was in the regular session. He vetoed that bill. We had our first special session. It wasn't on there. We had our second special session. It wasn't on there. All of a sudden, as we're supposed to draw new lines, he adds the dog bill. And I was like, oh, buddy. Like,
what is the dog bill? I need to know what is the dog bill.
Do you hear that, Lou?
Well, it's a tethering bill. And it talks about basically like dog abuse, which I was on the committee that it came through. And I was like, technically, I think we have laws to kind of cover this. And anyway, there was a lot. Basically, using a chain that's too heavy on a dog. But there was so much more in this bill. It was like, don't leave a dog unattended and not have potable water. Don't leave your dog outside and there's puddles everywhere. It was a lot of stuff where it was like, is this a dog or is this a child? I mean, it was definitely, it had to have adequate shelter. And I was like, can we get that for people? Right? Like I was really having questions in committee, not that I'm like against like dogs, obviously I love dogs, right? But I really wanted to challenge those that were looking at this bill and say, hey, this is actually a good model for us to talk about like homelessness, right? And like living individuals, pro-life party, right? Like I really was wanting to have that conversation, especially since we ended up with so many people. I was concerned about potential unintended consequences as it relates to homeless people, because I have so many, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say homeless, unhoused people.
Unhoused.
I have so many unhoused people, specifically in my district. And honestly, they usually are probably a lot better about taking care of their animals than some of us that have houses, right? Like that's truly their companion, but they're not going to have a doghouse because they don't even have a house. So I was like, this is kind of stupid, right? Like, do not make this a crime. Like if they can't, like it should be just kind of more so centered on whether or not there is something of an abusive nature. So there was the first portion of this bill I thought was absolutely amazing, because we really should look out for those that are, trying to train the dogs for dog fighting and things like that by doing improper tethering. So we're going to take that up because
But he could have just signed the bill and been, get the acclaim of being a dog lover, and it wouldn't have any negative consequences. And instead, he decides to ignore the dog. Why would someone do that?
It's very easy. It's very easy to rally voters around dogs. That is a very easy one to do.
We don't care about the people.
No, we don't.
No.
The same places that have dog bills probably put homeless spikes or unhoused people spikes coming up out of is that a thing in Texas, the spikes?
Not the spikes, not yet. Don't give them any ideas, but we did have groups that specifically went after unhoused people. They wanted to criminalize them. And so we had a stupid bill. I mean, there was like, hey, if you defecate or urinate in public, and it was specifically for homeless people. It was going to be punishable for 6 months in jail. I was like, I don't have time for this, guys, stop it. Like, this is stupid, right? Like, and so, that was one in my committee that I was able to kill, thankfully, but they did pass another one because they were so upset about Austin. And they were like, there's just too many homeless people, unhoused people. But as we were looking at the pandemic, obviously shelters were doing things differently as far as like social distancing and things like that. And so I'm like, so you don't want to provide for an alternative like measure. You're just saying if you give them a citation, which they potentially will miss court on, then somehow they're going to be more diligent about getting housing. I was like, that doesn't even make sense. And they decided that they wanted to punish, say, a city like Austin, and they wanted to prevent local electeds from buying and trying to help out, because Austin decided that they were going to buy a hotel to help out with their unhoused person's issue, and they had an issue with it. So
It's just, and that's another thing. I mean, I could spend like an hour at least talking about this because it's infinitely easier and less expensive to provide housing. So it's one of those things that it's same as healthcare. Like it's so much more affordable to just house people. Well, and I mean, we have housing issues here too, Anna. I mean, I know that you know, with the evictions going on, we're going to be seeing a surge. We see this I know Miami-Dade does the bulldozers where they come and just bulldoze the encampments and just, I mean,
they have a massive housing problem.
There is nothing more punching down. There's nothing more kicking down than going after people that don't have anything. Like, it's infuriating.
Well, I bet you didn't know this, but Tampa is the most, it costs the most, it's like the most expensive city to get housing in today.
Really?
Tampa's number one now, which is insane.
Well, Orlando is comparable to San Francisco just based on the cost of housing and wages here. Like, obviously, folks in San Francisco make more than Orlandonians, but when you look at the ratio, it is just it's as expensive with our quality of life and with the money that folks make. So it's a serious problem.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they're going to try to, they're trying to turn Miami into the next Silicon Valley. So,
well, we'll be underwater first. So that's neither here nor there. The same people that are trying to do that are also not addressing climate crisis. So that's not a problem we're going to be worried about. Trust me, we'll be needing scuba gear before we'll be worried about
the two primary issues of our future existence center around Medicare for all and the Green New Deal. Obviously, the Green New Deal is an economic policy. It's an environmental policy. There are many layers to it, but obviously our carbon footprint reduction is very important. We will love to discuss that with you ladies at a later date. But I think the last topic, which is very important to cover, one of the biggest selling points, I would say, Anna, for Nikki Fried or Charlie Crista, whoever ultimately ends up running, and if they have a chance to win against DeSantis, is to focus on Medicare expansion. I think that is immensely important.
I mean, Medicaid expansion.
Well, Medicaid expansion. It's 6 to 1.
All right. Well, I'm just all right.
But the reality is, I think the only way we're going to get universal health care in the United States is the way that we got it in Canada, which was in province to province. It started in Saskatchewan. Eventually, it moved to every province, and then it became a countrywide policy. I think that New York, the New York Health Act in particular, I think because of AOC's victory against Joe Crowley, it really just set off this whole, sort of exceptionally progressive movement. It's been highlighted now, as you know, with India Walton winning the mayoral race in Buffalo. So I think that there's a real opportunity there. Obviously, Texas and Florida, it's not going to happen anytime soon. So it's going to have to start in a state like New York, a state like California, possibly even a state like Washington. If you can talk about the importance of Medicare/Medicaid expansion in the state of Florida and the importance that would play in potentially making Florida blue in 22. And if that also, Jasmine, would potentially play a role in running against Governor Abbott in 22, if you would see that as being a strong campaign issue, especially in light of what has happened.
We're just trying to get healthcare. We're just freaking healthcare,
and especially in light of the abortion ban.
Yeah.
So I really think that this is a time to really hone in on the importance of Medicare/Medicaid expansion at the state level. Ladies, your thoughts. Anna, if you want to go first, fire away.
Yeah, 100%. So it's an interesting point because there actually was an effort to get a ballot amendment in Florida for 2022 that would expand Medicaid because, like you said, counting on the legislature, and at this point, the governor just does not seem likely. And for more context, for folks who don't know, Florida has not expanded Medicaid, which was an option that the Affordable Care Act created to expand eligibility. Right now in Florida, Medicaid is super, super narrow. And we have folks that they make too much money to qualify for any types of government plan today in Florida. They can't qualify for Medicaid right now, but they don't make enough to be able to afford any programs on healthcare.gov. So they're in this gap. And we're talking about hundreds and thousands of Floridians in this gap. And so closing the gap is very popular. And healthcare access is not a partisan issue. Like, everyone agrees that it does not make sense for someone to decide between paying their bills on time or going to see a doctor. And then, of course, someone who ends up maybe surviving a medical experience or a health issue, but then dies with debt and never actually gets out of the debt. So And don't even get me started on, just pharmaceuticals and insurance companies and everything else that makes up this really, really problematic and corrupt ecosystem. And so the expansion of Medicaid is a game changer. And if our gubernatorial candidates really focus on it, again, going back to this point you made, Jen, about a proactive conversation, right? Instead of just being anti-DeSantis, what are you going to do for the people of Florida? How will voting for you make my life better? That needs to be the question that every candidate asks themselves, because that's what you're committing to do, is that if you support me, I'm going to work to make your life better. And it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. We can all rise together. And the other part I want to lift up that Florida really struggles with, and I wonder what it's like in Texas, is that we have a shortage of just medical staff. And a lot of that has to do with our low reimbursement rates as well. And even just talking about nursing homes right now. And honestly, you could probably equate this to I think, every field, that wages are too low, right? Which is why Floridians voted to increase wages every year. But by the time we get to 15, it's not even going to be good enough anymore. So we have to have a real conversation about wages, because especially in the medical field, we don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough talent at all to meet our aging community members, alongside even folks who moved to Florida and folks who are born in the state. And so part of this conversation is not only do we expand Medicaid, but we have to increase reimbursement rates, and we have to address the coverage gap when it comes to the fiscal cliff, where Floridians who start making more money lose benefits, but they don't make enough money to actually afford the services that benefits we're offering. So increasing the fiscal cliff is another conversation to have. And at the end of the day, the federal government is a partner in this. And with the American Rescue Plan, the federal government made the deal even more accessible for states to consider. And yet Florida, at this point, that ballot amendment that I mentioned is now being shifted to 2024 because of the inability of raising money in time for 2022. So at the very least, I think we will see that ballot amendment if we don't see it out of legislature and out of governor's office. But of course, our focus should be on 2022 and this being a winning issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Anna said a lot. I'm going to say this. I think that Democrats have historically stumbled when it comes to messaging. And I think that Republicans live by keep it simple, stupid. And I think that healthcare, sadly enough, they have complicated it, right? For whatever reason. And so people don't understand. It's just like math, somehow it's become complicated. I'm how do you complicate some of the most basic things, right? But they do really good at kind of stirring up the drama. I think that technically it should be a winning message. I just think that it's not. At least here in the state of Texas, we lead in uninsured. We have 5.2 million Texans out of the almost 30 million that are uninsured. So there is no question about the need for that. It's just that sadly enough, we don't really do a lot of kind of the things that we need to do, right? We are a have and a have not seemingly society here in Texas, right? And so all of the focus is on the haves, right? We talk about property taxes and how there needs to be relief. Well, guess what? If you don't own a house, then property taxes is so far from your mental. But it's a big issue in the state of Texas. I will tell you that I am encouraged, but it's going to take some organization. Lloyd Doggett, who is a congressman out of the Austin area, actually has an amazing bill that we really need to be pushing at the forefront of everything. And it would allow locals to actually draw down that federal money instead of having to go through the state legislature. And so you'd have counties like Dallas County that says, okay, well, don't worry about it, state of Texas. We'll go to the feds and get our money ourselves. We will expand access here in our county. So there is legislation that is already written. It's already in the House. I just think that we've got so many other basic things that we're trying to get back to that we can't get to things like basic health care, right? And so there is a model that is there so that the counties don't have to actually be the self-initiating body. He is trying to do it where state legislatures like Texas and Florida can just be completely circumvented, and the locals would actually have the ability to start off and do what we're talking about potentially seeing done in a place like New York. So that's one thing that's really encouraging. I don't really know what someone runs on in the state of Texas, in a statewide aspect, because you've got to look at how big we are and really how different we are.
There's like 5 different states in Texas.
It is.
Florida's like that too. Florida's like that too.
You've got your coastal area, and they've got their own issues and their own concerns. And then you have like our large urban centers. And this is where we are booming with so many of the industries that are moving to the state of Texas. But we are running into so many housing issues because we just don't have enough housing. And then obviously that shoots the prices of everything up, because there's a lot less supply than there is demand. And so now we've got people that are being pushed out because now their property taxes are going up. So we end up with, gentrification issues. Like, we've got so many issues, and they're completely different. When you start talking to rural Texas about people just coming there in droves, they don't know what you're talking about, and they don't care about that, right? Like, they're trying to figure out how they are going to maintain this one factory that really is keeping them afloat as a community, right? Like, so I just think that it's tough to like figure out something that really transcends everything. And I honestly think that COVID-19 is probably your best bet at transcending. And I think kind of talking about all of the branches that go with COVID-19, the lack of local control, talking about healthcare from that standpoint, right? Like, how many of you were scared to go to the hospital because you were scared of the hospital bill? Right? Like, how many of you lost loved ones because they were concerned about the hospital bill, right? Instead of getting the treatment that they needed? Or how many of your friends and family went to work knowing that something wasn't right, but they had to because they couldn't afford not to, right? So I think that you can talk about wages from COVID-19. I think you can talk about, the fact that we are in an economic crisis because COVID has crippled us as well. I think everything kind of has to be centered with COVID, because I think that is where Abbott is failing in the most simplest terms that really can't be screwed up by whatever rhetoric they put out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're definitely right. And I think we are 100% in agreement in 2 of the most significant issues we face going forward, which is obviously building the bench and messaging. And I think it's very key to, yes, keep it simple, stupid, because that's what people want to hear. When you say make America great again and it works, and then you just say build back better and it works, it's like, well, there's really not much to it, but that's what the American people want to hear, I guess. So, hey, healthcare, you need it. Done. Just keep it simple.
Yeah. No, there you go. I love that. I may steal that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've been a salesman for 20 years. So as far as I'm concerned, it's like you just have to sell the people on what they want to hear. It's again, it's not unethical. It's just reality. You're fighting on their behalf, but you have to spell it out to them in a way that they understand. It's politics. It's a silly game that we have to play to make people's lives better. But I think we've got 2 amazing leaders right here that are definitely doing a hell of a job of making that so, right? Jasmine, Anna, needless to say, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast tonight.
Thank you so much. Always.
Before you go, if there's anything that you guys want to plug, anything that you're working on right now, anything you want to mention to the audience.
You got a book coming out.
Yeah, really.
Got a documentary you're working on. What's going on?
I'm not doing anything. Trying to figure out if I'm going to have a district to go back to in the state of Texas, everywhere. They're going through redistricting, and in my county, we are supposed to lose a House seat, and I'm the only freshman. And when it comes to the legislature, everything is about seniority.
So that's everything. Last one hired, first one fired. That's how it goes. Unfortunately.
Yeah. So right now we're having to kind of finagle through that, but I think no matter what happens to my seat, I can always run. My constituency doesn't go anywhere. So I don't know if anybody really wants to run against me, but we'll see what happens. But that's
I wouldn't want to run against you.
You're pretty badass. So yeah, they'd be in for quite a fight. They may have money, but you've got the pizzazz and the grassroots. Yeah. So that's what it's all about.
And Anna, obviously, we're gaining a seat, not losing a seat.
Well, we're gaining a congressional seat, right?
And it's going to be in your neighborhood. It's going to be in your neighborhood, so it's going to be somewhere in that I-4 corridor.
Correct. We're also in redistricting, so fighting for fair maps, and Florida is pretty much set to if Republicans get their way to give them a congressional majority, I guess we have to be really aggressive on their districting front. And then we've also launched our own voter registration initiative. So we're doing voter reds right now. If folks want to help with that, check out peoplepowerforflorida.com. That's our voter reg operation.
Peoplepowerforflorida.com.
Yeah.
And just so people have a point of reference, like I know of people down here in South Florida that were having problems dealing with their own representatives and getting their issues, their disability and stuff with COVID. And yet they were able to have Anna's office was able to help them. So it's just been like covering for not as worthy legislators.
And I think the best way to close is, one of the reasons why, we talked about, why Jen ran for office and what is the main reason that you serve in a state or federal position. It is an immense position of privilege. I mean, you have so much at your disposal in terms of what you can do to help and better people's lives. And yet it seems like the overwhelming majority of our elected officials, as it stands today, things are changing, but as it stands right now, most of our current, even local, state, and of course, federal legislators, they're really not that interested in actually serving the betterment of their communities. Some do. And it's like when we find the ones that do, it's like, oh my goodness, that's wonderful.
No, it's great.
No, that's kind of how it has to be for everybody. And so as long as we continue to build our bench, and you guys, I mean, we're a team here the way that we look at it. We need to build this non-corporate, non-partisan movement. And we believe that movement obviously has to be centered around labor.
Yeah.
Because as you like to say, people talk about like wanting to start a third party. No, we don't have a second party.
Yeah, we don't have a labor party.
We used to have two, up until, the Reagan 80s and the Clinton 90s, we used to have a party of management, which was the GOP, and a party of workers.
Or at least in theory, we believed it was. I don't know that it ever was.
Today, it's two parties of management and no party of labor, and that's what we're trying to change.
But yeah, so we're looking at you, Anna, 26.
Well,
26.
We'll see if we could get her to go in 24.
I don't know.
It's like trade-off here. You know what I'm saying? And then you never know. I've looked at.
My God!
I might.
Here we go. Thank you, ladies, so much for coming on.
I'll tell you what, Anna. If you run for governor in 26, I'll run for commissioner of agriculture. You can help me to that. I keep my word on that one.
All
so.
Right.
That's a conversation for a later day. We would love to have you back again. We like these discussions. I think it's great. I think sometimes the panels get too big, but I think this is a wonderful conversation, and we certainly look forward to communicating with you guys once again in the near future.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Good night, ladies. Well, again, two of the very best. They bring so much to the table. And like you said, it wasn't the right time for her to jump into.
No, she's being smart. And really it's a smart thing to do, and also recognizing where you're needed and where you're able to be most effective and doing what's in the best interest of your constituents and not necessarily your career. And one of the things that I do have issue with is, especially in Florida, people that are willing to forfeit their seats for a race that just for their own benefit. I don't know. It's aggravating, but I digress. We don't need to get into that.
And that, of course, ultimately becomes an even bigger problem, as we talked about. And when somebody says, well, why would Jen run against Wasserman Schultz? Shouldn't she run for that seat and that seat? The reality is Debbie Wasserman Schultz is one of the absolute worst representatives we have in this country for this reason. She is only in her mid-50s. And if you think she won't sit in that seat for another 30 years, then you got another thing coming. Because that's the problem. She is not going to walk away. Yeah. That is never happening.
And Blue Bandit, just for a frame of reference, Jasmine's awesome. Jasmine is one of the legislators in Texas that led the walkout. And took them out of state for a month. And they basically all went to, I don't know where they stayed ultimately, but they started out going to DC. Well, I don't know if they all stayed there the whole time, but Jasmine led the Democratic walkout on the state.
I think we need to have a very frank conversation. We have an amazing progressive up and coming leader here in Broward County named Elijah Manley, who we think very, very highly of. And he is running for the state house, and we 100% support him. The problem is a lot of other people who are running for office are trying to ascertain a position that is not realistic. And when we talk about building the bench, it is immensely important to check your ego at the door. If I could run for office against somebody like Wasserman Schultz, I would. but I don't have an ego in this.
However, speaking about this, we now have another confirmation for our panel. Guys, we're going to be hosting on September 27th. We will be hosting a candidate panel for District 20.
We got 4 now.
We have 4 people that are confirmed. 4 of the 6. We invited the top 6 that are confirmed. So we.
And
will
again,
be
this is nothing against anybody else who is running for
no.
this seat.
But really,
This is about,
it's we went with the people with the numbers.
You have to have polling, economic viability, and if
so
you are elected, that matters.
So we invited the top 6 people from that standpoint because it just I mean, we're not a huge platform, so we will be and this is not a debate. It's not like that, but we will be discussing healthcare, housing, education, climate, and police reform. Those are like the 5 issues. I mean, we'll see where we go depending on, and it also will depend on how many people we ultimately get, how many topics we can really cover. But yeah, we are going to be the source of our district's roundtable. And I highly doubt, given our political environment here, that anyone else will do this.
No, but it is very important, and we are not going to be doing softball questions. We may have, we may look to do have like a not even like a co-panels, but somebody in the chat, to facilitate questions and things like that.
But this isn't a gotcha. This isn't an attack. It's really a situation where we want people to see who the candidates are running for Alcee Hastings' seat.
One of the 6 people who will be on this panel will be the next congressional representative of this district.
And this is not. Yes, this is the Democratic primary, but this is one of those seats where it doesn't matter who the Republican is.
No, it does not.
We're
Which I thought was interesting because I did watch the panel that Dwight Bullard was hosting the other night, and one of the candidates actually was a libertarian candidate.
For which seat? For this?
20, yeah.
Okay, how many people? So
it was 6 per panel. This particular one had only 2 viable candidates on, which was Bobby DuBose and Barbara Sharif. Ironically, the only 2 that have not confirmed. The 4 candidates who are viable, who have confirmed, are County Commissioner Dale Holness, State Senator Perry Thurston, State Representative Omari Hardy, and healthcare entrepreneur.
She's just an entrepreneur. She's Sheila McCormick, and she's awesome.
Sheila Sherfless McCormick.
She's
the lady who ran against Alcee Hastings in the previous 2 congressional cycles.
Had the balls to do it when he was still alive.
So we are
speaks volumes.
So we are currently waiting on word from Representative DuBose and Commissioner Sharif. So we will see what ultimately comes.
But right now we have 4 confirmations. So we will be I sent you the graphic to start promoting that. I think we need to start. Okay.
Already have. We have.
And what else do we have coming up? I mean, we got to do news. We could do news.
Yes,
I have all of your stories
up. We've got a final discussion for the evening. And of course, we have some important news to discuss.
Canada. Oh, Canada.
Oh, Canada. But of course, we're not going to start with Oh, Canada, because that is a Chelsea Manning story. What we are going to start with is what I like to call the fitting conclusion of our discussion this evening.
Oh, okay.
And we could have actually brought that up during the discussion.
About Mexico?
The Mexico Supreme Court rules criminalizing abortion is unconstitutional. I mean, my God.
And yet, those people, the Mexicans, the rapists, the druggies, or whatever. So kudos to Mexico. Mexico had, oh God, here he comes, guys.
I was talking the entire time about Mexico, and I told you the Mexicans, they don't understand anything. They don't understand that they are just they have legalized abortion.
So no, this is not what they've done yet. Mexico's Supreme Court has ruled.
They totally legalized.
They haven't.
They legalized.
They has ruled that it is unconstitutional to punish abortion as a crime. It is a landmark ruling, clears the way for legalization of abortion across the country. So this is, their Supreme Court, like our Supreme Court, they're not going to make it legal. They're going to decriminalize.
But do you understand what that means? Yeah. That means that every American who wants an abortion,
can
Mexico's going to pay for it. It's really great.
Well, you know what? Incredible. And wouldn't it be a lot easier for us to go there for access to abortion if there wasn't a big wall was built in the way?
We built a big, beautiful wall, but they can hop over the wall.
Let me tell you something, people. The irony of this is suffocating. So we're building a wall between us and Mexico, and yet women in this country are going to apparently over time have to be going to Mexico to have reproductive freedom.
It's incredible. We said that Mexico would pay for it. They're paying for it. It's really incredible. I believe me, when I told you I would take care of everything, people, and I told you I'd be back in 24. Look at what I did. Look what happened. We banned abortion. And now Mexico wants to give you abortion. So we're not
Okay,
even
so
paying for it anymore.
and now
Mexico's going to pay for it. Really
so
incredible.
kudos, way to go, Mexico.
Really great Mexico. The Mexicans, I love the Mexicans.
Yeah,
They're tremendous people.
sure.
They're great people.
Yeah, go get your
Really,
salsa.
really-
Oh, that was Hillary with the hot
I
sauce.
just had to come in and let you know. Really great.
Okay, thank you. So then let's talk about how disappointed we are in our neighbors to the north. And I am very disappointed to say this. Everyone knows
Canada's been making a lot of
let me tell you,
mistakes.
not impressed. They're also doing all sorts of things to privatize stuff that we admire them for not having privatized. But and it pains me because my best girl is from Canada, but Canada is seeking to block Chelsea Manning. And so this is really not a good situation that's going on here. So a tribunal hearing to determine her admissibility, meaning her legal ability to enter Canada, is scheduled to take place on October 7th. Their Immigration and Refugee Board, they're about to revisit the case. They're basically arguing that Miss Manning's past crimes render her too dangerous to be allowed into the country. The government's position is that she should be blocked on grounds of serious criminality. Thousands of people are turned away at the Canadian border for similar reasons each year because she's dangerous. This is the person, Chelsea Manning, who again, I'm a huge fan, is the person who we should be, again, building monuments to. So the fact that you guys want to keep her from coming there is disgusting. It's disgusting. I feel like very disgusted with our northern neighbors right now. I'm just saying.
Unfortunately, there is
Chelsea Manning's a hero.
Yes, Chelsea Manning is a hero.
She's a hero.
And that's something that neoliberal corporatism doesn't find to be heroic. They find it to be an inconvenience.
I can't fathom that anybody watching this doesn't know who Chelsea Manning is, but for anybody who doesn't, Chelsea Manning is she's very cool. You know, I gotta say, like, I could get all like flushed because she did come on for my birthday, but Chelsea Manning is a techno data geek, basically, that exposed what our government was doing in killing civilians and what our military was doing killing civilians. She is the reason that Julian Assange was able to have that information for WikiLeaks. Yeah. Chelsea Manning served time for this. She's paid her dues more than ever necessary. She is a hero. And the fact that Canada is trying to keep her out because she's dangerous is absurd.
It is.
And so I don't know what the political background is to why they're doing this, but it is not because Chelsea Manning is dangerous.
No.
Anyway.
On a brighter note, we are seeing a true uprising in labor.
Yes.
And taking it to management. And so, as it turns out, as a lot of you guys know, and we did say at the time, that even when the Amazon warehouse workers in Bessemer, Alabama attempted to unionize and it failed, that was just the beginning.
It was suppressed.
They thought that they were going to stop it. No, what you actually ended up doing was now really opening up the can of worms because now people know that you cheated and now everybody's out for blood. And that's a good thing. So as it turns out, John Deere, the biggest tractor manufacturer in the United States, and kudos to them because they do make their stuff here in the States. Got to give them credit for that. But it looks like a huge strike is on the way.
10,000 production and warehouse workers for the farm equipment manufacturer John Deere will take a strike authorization vote on September 12th across 9 UAW locals in Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas. So this affects 3 states, 9 locals. This is a really big deal.
Oh, yes.
Strike authorizations at bargaining time are not unusual for John Deere workers, and they haven't struck in 35 years, but there are reasons now that this is looking like it could happen. So they've been having all sorts of issues like every other, working industry that we have here.
With the exception of Chicago, and Chicago's the 3rd biggest city in our country, Illinois is just as conservative as Iowa and Kansas. So when you have these really, heartland Midwestern bastions of conservatism and they have a labor movement growing, that's amazing.
But essentially, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they're screwing with their retirement.
Of course.
They're taking away their money that these people have worked for and put into the system and bargained for however many years ago that they did. And now they're trying to take away their retirement money. There's other issues too. There's a lot of things, but basically they're screwing them and they're not going to have it, and good for them. So we will keep everybody posted on what happens September 12th with that. But I think, again, I would love to be traveling around the country in like a camper, just attending all these union protests and walking with them, because this is really important.
And on that note, our final story of the evening.
And I'd like to point out, again, not a Jew. She's not a Jew.
Definitely not.
Heather Bresch, not a Jew.
Definitely not.
And yet has the same devil horn features. And I did give her the whole sinister face that I have applied to my congresswoman. So it's not anti-Semitic. And what's really funny is that in Judaism, there is no devil. So to even think that that's an anti-Semitic thing is just kind of like really weird.
That was just an excuse. That was just an excuse.
Obviously. So anyway, this goes towards the price gouging industry of big pharma. And this is a nice link between that and Senator Joe Manchin. So
nepotism, of course, is one of the most dangerous animals we have in politics. Everybody likes to harp on the obviously the Trumps and, of course, the Bidens. But that's only scratching the surface. This is a problem. This is a systemic problem. It's been going on for a long, long time. And, of course, Heather Bresch, and shout out to Ryan Grimm, chief editor of The Intercept, who did write this article.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's a lot of the nihilistic left, because that's their name now. You are the nihilistic left. You earned it.
I just think we should stop calling them left. They're just nihilists.
Okay, so the nihilist movement, they want to. They take orders from their leader to
just don't go there.
Cast out Ryan Grimm.
But Ryan Grimm wrote a great piece.
Great piece.
Do you want to talk about it?
Heather Bresch is the former president and CEO of the drug maker Mylan. Worked directly with CEO of Pfizer to keep prices of the company's EpiPen product artificially high. That's price fixing, price gouging.
And this did happen a while ago. Like this was something with the EpiPens. This is not a surprise. It went from like $100 to $600.
$700.
$700.
But here's the thing.
Here's the new thing.
There's a paper trail.
Right.
So as it turns out, Bresch literally is in hot water to the extent that among the documents is an email on behalf of Bresch, who is the daughter of Senator Joe Manchin, surprise, to her counterpart at Pfizer, then CEO Ian Reed. In the email sent in January of 2011, Bresch confirms a previous discussion with Reed in which she says that the two agreed that as part of the deal, Pfizer would disinvest or divest from its EpiPen competitor, Adrenaclick. That is market cornering, another illegal tactic. Eliminating its main competitor would then allow Mylan to continue raising its prices.
So basically, Joe Manchin's daughter is
a crook.
Is a price gouging corporate whore.
This is a violation of the Sherman Act. Now, this may be the attorney, but I study enough to understand the basic merits of the law. And the Sherman Act basically is the law that is in place to avoid market cornering and price fixing.
And we're so past that in so many industries right now. Like we need to take that. Like we've let that go so far.
Unfortunately, we live in a world today where you got to catch them red.
But this is a life and death thing.
Oh,
this isn't like when we're talking about social media monopolies, and I think that's all ridiculous too. But those are not life and death issues. This EpiPen, for people who need that, it's their life. And the fact that they're price gouging, like if you want to do, like, again, I am not against capitalism for non-essential things. If you want to charge a lot of money for some ridiculous gadget that people don't really need and they're willing to pay for it, have at it, rip them off, bring it on.
But again, this speaks to the bigger issue here. And this is why we are fierce advocates for Medicare for all through a single payer universal healthcare system. If you had it, this would not exist.
No.
You would not be able to corner the market because prices will be able to be negotiated through a government-funded system.
Right. See, that's what people don't understand. Our government, it's so interesting. They're actually supposed to be protecting us from that industry, right? Like their job is to be protecting us from price gouging. That's their job.
This is a concept of limited government because unfortunately the conservative right, they're actually not that smart. It just so happens that unfortunately both parties are bought off, so they don't actually frame the
I mean, you do realize
properly.
Other countries don't allow their businesses to screw over their people like this.
Everybody always references the Meghan and Harry interview where people in the UK were aghast.
They could not believe the pharmaceutical commercials.
My goodness.
Don't do it. Please don't do it. Please just don't do it. Okay? Just don't. See, the crown season is going to be coming up again.
Oh, that's too bad.
I love that.
But the point is, we have a for-profit healthcare
it's a
system.
problem, people. It's
and
a problem.
that is why this happens.
And that
this is all connected. This is all connected.
So,
and do you really think that she wouldn't be in federal prison right now if it wasn't for her father?
Well, and no. Do you think she'd have that job in the first place if it weren't for her father? And do you think that the legislation would be with the They work in tandem. They work together. That's how it happens.
The mother's involved as well.
It's all, look, it's disgusting. And these people are criminals.
The worst part about the story, the worst part of it all, is that not only did Heather Bresch get a severance package of $37.5 million, this company, Mylan, is based in Morgantown, West Virginia.
Oh my God.
They just shut the doors and 1,400 jobs were just eliminated, meaning that if we're really being realistic on what a nuclear family looks like, that's about 5,000 families who have now had their lives ruined.
And let's remember that West Virginia is like the poorest state.
It is the poorest state in the country.
These are people that are just living in a condition that most people on the coast can't even fathom.
No.
And this woman gets a $38 million golden parachute in a place where people are eating mud patties. It's just
at the point now where
they really need to big builder moats, because I got to tell you, to people like this Heather Bresch or whatever, I'd be concerned for my safety.
I would too.
I would. And you know what? It was sort of like that thing at the Wilton Manors parade when Debbie was all thinking that it was an assassination attempt against her, which is ludicrous. But it's the concept of when you really feel that you're such a crappy person that people would be trying to kill you, you might want to examine that.
Yeah.
Like the idea of somebody wanting to kill me is, if that came to mind as my first response at being in a car accident, that somebody was attempting to kill me, I'd question my life choices. I'm just saying. And that goes, this woman, I hope you've got a big moat, sweetheart, because I feel like it is our job to facilitate and fan the flames of everybody coming after you, and not in a physical way. I am not inciting riot.
Where are the legislators in the Democratic Party basically telling Joe Manchin, you are going to get in line with the PRO Act and the reconciliation bill, or your daughter is going to federal prison?
They'll never do that. I wish they would, but they'll never do that. Because the truth is, if they were to do that to her, then it's like
it's open season for everybody.
Oh my God.
I'm telling you guys, it's just a question of when the first domino falls, because that's what it's going to take. It takes one domino and then everybody gets inspired.
Let it be that corporate crone.
Yeah, let it be. So on that note, we will see you guys on Monday. What
do we have on Monday?
We have, ironically, the healthcare conversation continues.
Oh, the healthcare
So Ash Kalra will actually be coming on, representative who presented the CalCare bill, appropriations bill.
We're getting all in with state legislatures, and
this is the new path.
It is. And the important thing, of course, to note is that, with the exception of like Anna and a couple other people, the majority of state legislator allies are not here. They're not in Florida.
Not in the state of Florida.
So that's funny that it is Monday.
We are very fortunate. We do have one awesome one here in South Florida in the state Senate named Chevron Jones. But outside of Chevron, there unfortunately is not that many. So we're very friendly with State Senator Jason Pizzo. But, again, there's not enough, and you need more of that.
And we have a Senate candidate coming on also on Monday, and I'm not sure exactly what state.
Josh Reel from the state of Florida.
Okay.
Hey, let's have the conversation.
Hey, you know what? Maybe it on.
We can convince him to run for the state house or the state senate. You never know.
I don't know.
And then of course, just so you guys know, I am going to be on the road, so I will be working remote for the next 2 shows. So next Monday, next Thursday.
And next Thursday, we're having Tom Hartman come on and talk about his new book. And it's a series that Tom has done. So this one is The Hidden History of American Healthcare. I've read Hidden History of American Oligarchy. And I think what we're going to have to do is split these, and you're going to read that one.
I'll take care of this.
Okay, you want to read that? I'll read this. And so that is one of the benefits of having both of us, because otherwise I can't read everything. And plus I have so many other things.
It's going to be very interesting.
So yeah, we have some good stuff coming up, and we've been able to secure, excitingly, when is the India Walton because I'm very excited about this.
India Walton will be our candidate guest on Thursday, September 23rd.
Okay, there it is. Right. And for people who don't know, India Walton is Buffalo's
She's the new
mayor
badass
of Buffalo, and she is a socialist, and I say that in such the best way possible.
And not only that, but you're going to see what a real badass looks like,
Oh.
because she is taking the fight to former Mayor Brown right now and basically telling him, you legally can't do this, and I'm going to see to it that
she's
you fall
going
flat.
on the offense, and
She
I'm
is,
glad. And I'm
and that's
glad
what
to
you
see
should do.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to see it. But anyway, so we will have a chance to talk to her, and I'm kind of going to probably be fangirling because I think that's just really cool.
She is pretty awesome. And
Yeah.
like I said, the New York Health Act 2022.
A lot of
guys,
good guests coming
that's
up,
where it's
people. A
coming
lot
out.
of good guests.
We'll see you Monday. Peace
Bye,
out.
y'all.